Every day, you and I get bombarded with negative news. And just like our bodies becomes what we eat, our minds become the information that we consume. If you want to stay positive, it's so important that you also listen to stories that inspires you and uplifts you. In this podcast, we interview world-leading experts dedicated to solving the world's most pressing problems. And if you stick around, I promise you will not only be as informed as if you watch the news, you will feel uplifted, inspired, and have more positive energy in your life. Welcome to Great.com Talks with. Welcome. Today Great.com talks with PTES.org, which stands for the People's Trust for Endangered Species. And this is an organization that has been standing up for wildlife all over the UK and in the rest of the world as well for over 40 years now. And with the help of scientists, that's a tricky word, conservationist. Oh my God, Ian White is going to have to help me with this. Landowners and the general public, they have been working to protect UK's delicately balanced ecosystems by protecting the most endangered species. And I'm here with Ian White, who is a dormouse and training officer for the organization. And this is it's a specific type of rodent that I don't know very much about, to be honest. So I am very interested to talk with someone that has a specific interest in an animal I know very little about. So Ian, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
So how would you describe your organization with someone that might not be so familiar with your cause or the challenges you're facing for the wildlife in the UK?
Well, I think in your introduction, you kind of looked or implied that we were very much UK based. And I think for most of the time we haven't. We've been more internationally based or supported international projects. So over the last 40 years, we've funded a range of international projects that are predominantly looking at species of conservation concern where we feel we can make a difference. So, for example, one we're still involved with at the moment, we're looking at, or we're helping conserve giant otters in Peru, slow lorises in Java, lions in Tanzania, and leopards in Iran. So there's a range of projects,
wow,
and we work with overseas partners to try and deliver conservation benefits to those species. I suppose it's only been in the last 20 years or so we've started not focusing really, but actually involving more UK species. So we've been the key conservation charity in the UK for dormice for the last 20 years. Probably for the last 5 or 6 years, we've been doing a lot more work on the European hedgehogs. And also we do quite a lot of work on water vole in the UK as well. So it's not like we're shifting our focus, we just kind of added to what we do. So as well as doing international projects now, we also do national ones as well.
So help me understand then how this started. Who started the organization? Did you begin with just one pair of species and you said, no, we want to protect these as well and these as well, and expanded all over the world?
Yeah, I think we started off pretty much as an international charity. So we were funding work overseas. We initially started off by taking money in and seeing where we could help species of conservation concern internationally. And that's just kind of slowly developed and grown, I have to say. And we're also quite, I suppose, in many ways quite fortunate because we haven't kind of set our sights and saying, well, we'll only fund projects, mammal projects, or only fund bird projects, only fund fish projects. We can pretty much fund any species of conservation concern internationally, which means we have great flexibility, which is quite exciting from our point of view.
Right. And you're active in the UK, and I read on your website that 2/3 of the wildlife species has declined in the UK over the last 50 years. Yeah. How would you say the situation for wildlife is in the UK compared to your international projects?
Well, certainly recent information has come out looking at the global loss of biodiversity or the potential loss of biodiversity around the world. And certainly in the UK, we don't do particularly well in terms of conserving what we have. We're not doing a great job on it, I have to say. It almost appears from a personal point of view, I've been involved with PTES since 2006, so I've been involved in this for quite a while. And it does almost see from the government point of view, the government will set guidelines as to how they want to try and improve biodiversity, but the goals kind of keep changing and keep moving and keep shifting. With the overall consequence of that is generally declines still seem to be persisting, and we still seem to see a loss of our wildlife, both in numbers and kind of diversity in the UK. So
Yeah.
there's still a lot of work needs doing here.
It's a big challenge for sure. So what is the approach of PTES? What is your main strategies for preventing wildlife loss?
I think I suppose two things really. One is it works both nationally and internationally. Is from that you have to identify people that are close to the projects or close to the species and the people, because conservation is as much about people as it is about the large exciting animals or even the small unexciting animals. It's as much about people. You have to find people that are keen, enthusiastic, able to engage with others. So a lot of the projects, as I say, we fund is local people at a local level, passionate about a species that they can then enthuse others to try and help conserve a species. And in many ways, that's also what we do in the UK. An awful lot of my work is basically talking to volunteers, to landowners, to people who might be able to assist, because at the end of the day, I'm only one person trying to help conserve a species in the UK. I can't really do it alone, so the only way we can do it is by involving other organisations, other individuals, by talking to them to try and enthuse them as well to help species.
Right, and I think this is a interesting time then to switch in and talk more about what you do, because I think your passion for preserving dormouse mice might be a good example here then of how PTES as a whole works. So how does someone go about saving these mice? Tricky words today.
Okay. Well, dormice, I'll just give you a bit of a background on dormice first, which might help. So one of the problems with dormice is people often confuse them with mice and rats, which public often perceive as being a pest or nuisance species, or can be a pest or nuisance species. So there's quite a lot of species of mice and rats throughout the world. There's a lot less species of dormice. So these dormice are a much more specialized species. There's only about 26 species worldwide, so it's quite a small group. And they tend to be habitat specialists. We have a native species in the UK is hazel dormice. So this is a species of ancient woodlands, old hedgerows, and scrub, basically. So it's kind of been here. It's a native species, so they came in with the last ice age. But they always live at low densities because they have they breed quite slowly. They hibernate over winter, so that reduces their breeding potential. So this is a species that lives at very low densities. In terms of the value of the species, it's really and it doesn't really have one in terms of the likes of rabbits or even edible dormice is actually used to be a food source in the past. But hazel dormice don't. But what they do have now is if an area or a habitat is good for hazel dormice, and you have hazel dormice in that area, it's likely to be good for a broad range of other species as well. So we can use hazel dormice as a really good key indicator species. If we've got hazel dormice in a woodland or in a hedgerow, it means we've got a broad range of other species as well, which makes it really, really valuable. So how do we go about kind of protecting a species, looking after a species? Well, with so many other things is really the declines of hazel dormice are, I suppose, three reasons really. One is management of where they live, so management of woodlands. The other is the isolation of woodlands in the landscape, so the habitat fragmentation. Dormice need to have a tree and shrub layer to kind of move around and get around the countryside in. And the third, which is trickier to do anything about, is the impacts of climate change. So three things: woodland management or lack of inappropriate woodland management, habitat fragmentation, and climate change are all impacting on dormice declines in the UK. And I have to say it's not just in the UK, this is a European species. My suspicion is that actually similar things are probably happening in mainland Europe as well. The difference again within the UK is very much at the edge of the range for the hazel dormouse, not because of where it lies geographically, but because of the maritime climate we have in this country. is we can have quite wet winters, can have quite wet springs, and that impacts on dormice survival, hibernating, and also dormouse breeding as well. Whereas you tend not to have those extremes in mainland Europe. So we are right at the edge of the dormouse range, but nonetheless, they have been here for the last 10,000 years. So we should do our very best to try and make sure populations are maintained. So how do we do that? Well, we have a monitoring program that's been running for 30 years now. So we have a lot of volunteers going out, looking at dormice in nest boxes and counting dormice, letting us know how the dormouse population is faring. And it's not doing very well. Since the year 2000, we've lost over half of our dormouse population in the UK, which is a dramatic decline. So in 20 years, we have lost half the UK's dormice. So the monitor is important because it tells us what's happening to the dormouse population nationally, and then it means we can start to do something about it. So what we've looked to do about it, the charity do own some land, but it's not huge amounts of land. We're not really a landowning organisation. So you have to work with other people to provide guidance and help on how to best manage their land to try and improve things for dormice. Dormice have also become extinct in a number of areas of the UK, and there's been a dormouse reintroduction programme running since 1993 to see if we can restore dormice to those areas. So in terms of conservation, it's very much focused on trying to improve woodland management, try and improve things for dormouse, to try and re-establish dormice where they were known to have existed but don't anymore, and also trying to improve habitat links and improve the connections to allow dormice to disperse out into the wider landscape. So that will improve, longer term will improve local populations, will improve dispersal routes, and also put them back, as I say, where they once were.
Right. And something I see interesting in what you said is your assumption that a lot of people see dormouse mice as a rat or a regular mouse and see them as kind of this pest animal. So is that a hard hurdle to overcome? I guess if you want to protect wooden areas for an elephant or an animal we have more connection to, it's got to be easier than trying to protect. I guess it's a hard sell, right? Someone wants to build something and you want to preserve the woodlands for a rodent.
We're very lucky with dormice because dormice are incredibly cute. So
they are, yeah.
If people get to see a dormouse and you can explain it to them as to that dilemma in terms of why this isn't a mouse, why this species isn't a problem, people are usually pretty sold on it. So I don't really see it as a problem. I see it as an education or training opportunity as to trying to make sure that more people know that message, that this is not a pest species. It will never be a pest species. It is actually a really good indicator of very high quality habitat.
Right, and that's the mindset shift that I guess is very important, and a good thing you got to speak about it in this podcast today. So help me understand then, from PTES points of view, what would be a really great outcome for your work with the dormice in the next, say, 10 years?
Well, I suppose ultimately it was to see the dormouse decline in the UK that we know is occurring, to see that initially stabilize and then actually start to increase again. But as I say, just seeing the decline from the last 20 years is pretty dramatic. Having, I say, lost 50% of our dormice in the last 20 years. So to see that stabilize over 4 or 5 years, because dormouse populations, like most small mammal populations, fluctuate annually. So you need to take an average over a number of years. So in your 10-year window, 5 years of that will be taken up by just looking at the average population. But I suppose ultimately I would feel we've succeeded from a dormouse point of view if we start to see that decline stabilize and then slowly start to improve over time. Right.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to the day when I do interviews with nature organizations and people start saying, hey, you know what, it's actually turning around. We're seeing the numbers, we see the numbers go up. And I guess dormice is a very good indicator on how the ecosystem as a whole is doing.
It is. And I would agree with you. And I'd also hope, whilst the current pandemic has been tragic in many senses. The one thing that we've kind of seen about it is because a lot of countries have been in kind of local lockdowns and people have spent a lot of time at home, I think people are starting to become a little bit more aware of their environment and the areas around them. And we've certainly had a number of calls in terms of coming in, I suppose people showing a lot more interest in their wider environment as a consequence of being kind of having to stay indoors because of the pandemic. So I hope that people will start taking a lot more interest, I suppose, in the environment, and that is then reflected in our political masters that actually start doing something a bit more perhaps proactive in how we might alter, change, improve things for both wildlife and our natural environment.
I really enjoy that. You see the benefits something like the pandemic can bring. And what you're saying now is interesting to me. You're talking about taking political action, but what else can someone do that want to do something to help protect the wildlife in the UK, for example?
Well, I have to say for dormice specifically, it's difficult because dormice are highly protected under various tranches of legislation. So they are a very protected animal, and so it makes them illegal to disturb. So it's very difficult for people to get involved immediately. But what they can do, and again, it's something I think we're very lucky about in the UK, is we have a large number of NGOs, so non-governmental organisations, and conservation charities, where people can go and volunteer and they can go and help and work outside under the guidance of those charities. And I think we do have a very good volunteering ethic in the UK, and there is real opportunity for people to get out and do something. And all that kind of helps because an awful lot of, or one of the reasons that species are declining is actually I suppose almost the simplification of habitats. So many people driving around the British countryside will think, oh, it all looks very green, it all looks very nice, doesn't this all look wonderful? And the reality is it's not that wonderful. It's actually quite simple in terms of a lot of the diversity in the habitats is simple, becoming more and more simple. So to actually go and volunteer with a conservation charity, kind of put something back in and trying to help improve those habitats for the better is, I think, a pretty good thing for people to do.
I think so too, and coming together with like-minded people and doing something together that is positive for the environment, I guess, has a good effect for your overall well-being and how connected you feel to the environment as well.
Absolutely. I think one of there's a real issue in terms of people becoming less and less connected with the wider countryside. I mean, when I kind of think back to my childhood, I spent a lot of time on farms. My wife, her father he spent summer on a farm, and you kind of look now, there are a lot of people involved in farming and actually involved in being outside within the environment. And you look now with a lot of people living in cities, there seems to just be a real disconnect between a lot of people and the countryside that supports them.
Yeah, I think so too. And okay, so we talked about what someone can do to help dormice, but if someone wants to support PTSD as a whole, what can someone do to help or to get involved?
I suppose at the end of the two things really. One is in terms of we're obviously require on voluntary giving to basically support, to allow us to support these projects. So it can kind of, I suppose, come two ways round. One is that these projects obviously require funding, so it's actually support us with the donation to what we do. The other is if people have a real passion for a species and feel there's a problem there, is we are also a grant-giving organisation, so they can actually come to us with a project to actually see if we are able to fund it. And one other thing we do, which I'm particularly proud of, I must admit, is that we also support interns. So this is young people that have come through university or college with a passion for conservation and keen to get into and move into the sector. Is we will often fund, or we will fund a number of their projects in a year to give them kind of the first step on the ladder of moving into or becoming a professional conservationist.
Wow, that's a really exciting opportunity. Now, We have come up to the end of this interview. Ian White, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with Great.com today.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for you listening, if you enjoyed this conversations and would like to help us out to spread these kind of messages in some way, something that we would really appreciate that you can do is to go into your podcast app and press the subscribe button. That will greatly help us climb in different top lists, and then more people can hear this kind of messages. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.